Good morning, June 2020, year of the plague. Statues now and then. When I was a child in Transylvania, my cousin and her friends played a game called Statues and Goddesses. It was a combination of hide and seek and the third grade mythology book. Every girl named herself after a Greek goddess and hid. One person, usually me, removed his blindfold after counting to 10 and went in search of his favorite goddess. When he found her, he froze next to her in the bushes or the ruins until my cousin, always the goddess Athena, called to us out of hiding. To her displeasure, I had a thing for Aphrodite, so I always froze with her, despite all the obvious hints Athena gave me as to where she could be found. I liked being a statue with Aphrodite, but I couldn't be a statue for long because Aphrodite, whose Roman name was Venus, hugged me. I remembered her long white summer arms, and I couldn't believe when I saw the armless statue of Venus de Milo at the Louvre. Someone had stolen the arms of my early love. Why? So she couldn't hug me, evidently. Her body was in the Louvre, but some pervert had her arms. I saw many mutilated classical statues, Puritans castrated Greek athletes. The breasts of numerous goddesses were worn shiny by the palms of schoolboys touring museums. Philosophers like Socrates missed parts chiseled out of them by vandals or seekers of wisdom, which in many cases were one and the same. Cicero, known for his eloquence, had his eyes stolen, a fate shared by many classical celebrities. By the 5th century of the Common Era, sculptors didn't even bother with eyes, though they didn't leave out the genitals. Roman emperors were broken as soon as they were out of power or killed, and often recast to look like their successors. Only Caesar is usually the statue of Caesar, but his haircut lasted longer than most of his statues. Idealized or decorative statues marched through the history of humanity, an alternative version of an afterlife that resembled nothing of their actual life or real history. Power without statues is just a stack of execution orders. The documents signed by Stalin for killing people are more numerous than his statues, and that's saying something. There were more Stalin statues in the Soviet Union and its satellites than food stores. It took almost a century to set them up and about 3 years to sell them to German collectors as garden gnomes. One Stalin was so large, his bronze feet straddled the Volga and Don rivers. His head was literally in the clouds, equipped with death rays that killed the birds that had the nerve to land on his head. The dead birds were collected by starving people that swarmed at his feet. A guardian housed in a bronze cell in his boot chased away these collectors of bird corpses. In some places, like Stalingrad, statues of Stalin were pulled down before they could be sold, proof that his subjects always wanted a piece of him. Now and then, when lakes dry up, a statue of Stalin emerges from the bottom and scares the hell out of the locals. Stalin's predecessor, Lenin, was mummified and is still in display in the Red Square in Moscow. His head is stuffed with newspapers, the medium that brought about the revolution. I had to wear a pin of Lenin's head when I was in school. When I came to the US and told my friends they wanted one too, they thought I had the head of John Lennon. Napoleon, who comes only second to Stalin in the number of statues, was even found hiding inside the statue of Henry V or the Fourth on Pont Neuf in Paris. The sculptor was a Bonapartist. The reasons for putting up statues vary, but the rules are this. The shorter the guy, the bigger his statue. The more glorious his head, the more heinous his crimes. And this, if a guy is mounted, the horse is bigger than the man. Except for Joan of Arc, I can't think of any woman on horse. In New Orleans, she's been moved by trucks so many times from her original place that Ford should just give her a Mustang. And speaking of New Orleans, I cheered when General Lee came down from his insanely high pedestal. Like Stalin, he was so high up there, the FAA had to put up signs for airplanes not to hit him. The only other statue I've seen as high in the US is the Christ of the Ozarks that had to leave about 10 meters out of his feet to not cause an aviation disaster. This autobiography in statues is incomplete, but the political sexual stories involving statues run through my life like an aqueduct of weirdness. This sketch is dedicated, of course, to the current orgy of iconoclasm in the USA. Tearing down statues is very satisfying and highly advisable in the current redressing of wrongs brought about by living models of American statues in the South. Most of them were put up after the Civil War by racists during the Civil Rights era. They are symbols of fake history. People learn more about these people from knocking them down than they knew while they stood there. And this, if only for pedagogical reasons, is a good way to teach history. It's just good sense to take these dudes down. They scare the children.